What's going on, YouTube? This your boy Heru Haynes. This is another installment of Facts Over Feelings. To get feelings at the door so we can get to the facts. Your boy is back, right? Alright, I've been down a little bit, been on a hiatus simply because I just haven't seen my son in 7 months, been going through battles here. You already know the situation with the property. And, I think one of the things that was even more discouraging than that, because I already know this is a collective issue. So, that's when I really knew that it was deep. When, I know that the energy that we're going to have to, the energy that we need to get ourselves up out of this predicament will be a collective energy. And so it's sad when, you see a lot of us being misguided and misdirected, distracted simply because people have not done enough research. The surface level reasoning has gotten us into this mess, and it's gotten us caught up into a lot of subject matter and to a lot of events and circumstances that have not been fruitful for us, in particular our people, right? And I think that, like I said, the most disheartening thing is like when you go on these people platforms and you listen to them, and the message, a lot of the times the message is cool. I don't disagree with a lot of the things that some of these brothers and sisters say. I just think that, to me, there needs to be a heightened sense of urgency. And you do that by how you present the information, right? And so many times I see, not all the time they don't do this. And I understand why people do it. They may reason, and some of them may believe it wholeheartedly, that this is the way that I will increase traffic. I think, especially if you claim yourself to be a spiritual person, you put it out in the universe, it's going to do what it do. And I know that you can aid in programming your subscribers to work in an industrious manner for you in order to get your channel out, then that's great, because it does work. And I hope that that's this message resonates enough so that you do that too as well. But the point being is that from what I do see is that when they even are spreading a serious message, it's always watered down, in my opinion, when they're like, oh, smash them, like, even before you even get an opportunity to hear what they're talking about. Now, if you develop a rapport with the person who you view, of course, many times the person is going to like even before the individual starts talking. But I think that we got to get out of the habit of that, because if your channel is growing, as it always usually is, no one really knows you like that, so you have to prove each and every time, right, that you're digging and you're doing your due diligence in order to present and give, the information that's going to motivate people to make those necessary changes. And so I always look at it like what if, like, for real, like what if Jesus came down here and was like, all right, look, now just walk me for a second, for real though. What if he was just like, I'm about to tell y'all who gonna die and who gonna live? So, log on to my subscribe to my YouTube channel at 8 o'clock. I'm going live, and I'm finna, just give out the names, so everybody get on live, 8 o'clock come, and then, Jesus like, yeah, so I know all y'all here, all y'all waiting to hear who made it, who didn't, you know what I'm saying? So we're gonna get into that. But before we get into that, I need y'all to smash them likes. You be like, what? Nigga, just, I don't know, man. That's, to me, and that's why a lot of people say, oh man, hey, well, you should do this, and I'll donate to. Look, I know you're going to need every penny, every ounce of energy you're going to need in order to increase the chances of maintaining security for you and your family. Your well-being is going to be dependent on, or contingent on, how well your environment is put together. That's what's going to determine that. Because remember what we talked about, we want to alienate ourselves from this top-down philosophy. Each one teach one. These villages have to be compact and strong, and then you find out that you've created an impregnable network. Right? And that's what we need. That's what we need to encourage, because like we said before, we've said this and we've elaborated on this in previous videos where we talked about, in politics, that top-down philosophy just does not work. You elect a president and you hope that power will trickle down into state. That doesn't always work, right? And you've seen that during this pandemic. When you want power or more of your freedoms, who do you have to complain to? The governor. Now you got these signs in people's yards talking about recall Whitmer, right? Or that would be the governor of my state, right? But the thing is that, that's always been where the power at rest, with the people in their state, because every state has their own problems. Every state has their own constitution, and the power really rests with the people, right? And so every time that 4-year cycle comes around and it's time to elect your governor, and it's time to elect your attorney general, and it's time to to elect your county prosecutors and it's time to elect your judges and your sheriffs, where are you at? Less than 10% of you people get involved to participate. That's how you change. That's real reform. You see, and so you see it help, taking place in the state where you're at because you're participating in local and state elections. All right. And so the same has to be said, in the conscious community. Our communities, we have to get involved in our communities. And as the communities get tight knit, then we'll find out that network, will be established naturally, organically. All right. So, when we took a look at that, like I said, one of the things that I want to isolate, we're going to isolate some of these hot button topics, right? And the first one we're going to take a look at is Trump and his campaigning, against these voting irregularities, right? And so everybody's been up, and then, you got even YouTubers who talk about it, and they've done multiple shows on them. And I don't, like I said, that opens up, that just opens it up, right? And so we got to go deep. We're surface level now. And so let's just go a foot deep. We're not even going to go casket deep, 6 feet. We're just going to go a foot deep and we say, okay, well, if we're dealing with elections, let's not just look up elections. Let's see, has this ever occurred before? And if it has occurred before, why wasn't it a big deal made out of it then? And if it was a big deal made out of it then, and then it keeps occurring, is there a pattern that is established? So it's, so when we talk about the 5 times, listen, brothers and sisters, and I don't want to have to continue to keep repeating myself like Dr. Umar Johnson in order to fit it at home, but let's, like they say, repeat to remember to repeat. That's what we got to do now. So I'm going to just do a little bit of that. I'm not going to go overboard. I'm going to leave that to Umar. But fact of the matter is, 5 times in United States history, the president was selected by the Electoral College, right, without the aid of the popular vote. So that's 5 times, brothers and sisters, that the president was selected without winning the popular vote. What elections were those? Because dates are the best receipts, right? The ink never goes bad on those. Now, that is the election of 1824. That's the election of 1876. That's the election of 1888. That's the election of 2000 and the election of 2016. Now, when you isolate 2 of those, which is incredibly important. One being 2016. We already know who was those 2 individuals that, clamored for the public spotlight and got on the scene. That was Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump didn't win the popular vote. Okay, he won 306 electoral college votes, 3 6s, right? Okay, and so why didn't Hillary or why didn't the media make an uproar about her not winning the electoral college because she won the popular vote? Because it wasn't time for that theater yet. Okay, now let's go to 1824 because this is most important. This is what I call devastating logic. Now, KRS-One made a comment and he talked about the I think he phrased it wrong, obviously, because he said, I think he called it the electoral college or something, but it's the electoral college, right? But neither here nor there, that couldn't take away from the veracity of his comment. The fact that the electoral college does select the president, okay? But I'll go even further to say that the electoral college doesn't even select the president as well. And how do you know that? That's when you isolate 1824. Pause. Remember when we talked about a place emphasis on the compartmentalization of information? Remember I said to you, and I tell brothers and sisters all the time, everybody has information that has been compartmentalized. This is one of the reasons why nobody knows what's going on. All right, because if you already been given this, only studying chapters, because there's no student in United States history that has been assigned a book and has read it from cover to cover. They don't work like that. They give you chapters to study. And then think about it. Most people don't pay attention to the chapters that they give you to study. All right. So this is what frames your worldview. Okay. So with that being said, we're isolating the 1824 election. Might not know much about it. And if you do know much about it, it's always in the sense of Andrew Jackson being vilified as a warmonger, which he was. But there's other things that he was doing which go hand in hand with what a lot of people feel are the tenets or the bedrock of of nationalism, especially American nationalism. Okay. All right. And so the fact of the matter is that Andrew Jackson won. Now listen to this, brothers and sisters. Andrew Jackson won the Electoral College and the popular vote, and he still did not become president in the 1824 election between him and John Adams. Did you hear what I just said? Andrew Jackson lost the presidency after winning the Electoral College and the popular vote, and John Adams was in there. Now, did Andrew Jackson say it was a sham? No, he didn't. Why didn't he say it was a sham? Because he ended up winning, becoming president in 1829 to 1833. See, they know it's a game. And how do we know that? Because 1824 was also the first presidential election where the popular vote was installed. So you just installed the popular vote. Now, that was the election for the 10th president of the United States. So the first 9 presidents of the United States were elected by themselves. Matter of fact, the first 6 by one party. We already went over this. It was called the Democratic Republican Party. They elected the first 6 presidents. It was called the era of good feelings. These Europeans was feeling so good. We just like, oh, we're going to pass you power. Everybody get a little power that we want to place in power. They didn't let you vote for any of these individuals until the 1824 election. That's what you need to know. And see, this is what even Europeans don't know about their own history. So now this argument about voting irregularities, voting discrepancies, all that's out the window. They're distracting you. Now, does that prove that they're distracting you? See, that's why I say with KRS-One and all these individuals who claim to be intellectual individuals, but yet dig on the surface. I just went a foot deep. But the 1824 election and isolating that and talking about those incongruencies, obviously that went 6 feet deep. You see how you can go deeper, and then what does it help to do? It helps to reshape your worldview. Now, see, look, the problem with a lot of people is that, arrogance after a while of they get comfortable. They get comfortable in their approach. Me, I never get comfortable. Constant training, brothers and sisters. That's really all it's about. Now, what I wanted to establish too as well. Now, this is the other thing. I'm going to kind of spin off this on this election. Now, this is the problem with nationalism. Nothing really matters until it happens to you. Okay, let me say that again. Nothing really matters until it happens to you. And a lot of Americans say, because you even hear black people talk about there's always the end times. It was feeling like the end times for a lot of people in so-called quote unquote third world countries. All right, it's been feeling like the end times for a very long time. Now you see it at your doorstep. It's a domestic situation. So all of a sudden, now the world is coming to an end. How arrogant of Americans. How arrogant. You see, because if you notice, let's just isolate one example, because a lot of people you can read the book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. Everybody knows about how we've upended and compromised the sovereignty of nations in Central America, South America, and all that different stuff. But we'll talk about something that a lot of people know that's on the books, in history books, that they acknowledge. That it's not a big conspiracy theory, and a lot of people got to act like you're digging or going down a rabbit hole when you're discussing these things. We're isolating what's called Korea, the Korean Peninsula. Now, before that, and now we know that this is what we call a name that that we know it as. That's an exonym, right? The name that they call it. I'm not from Korea, so I wouldn't know what the native name is for it. I have to do some research on that. But what we do know is that we know that when they first came there, it was a whole peninsula, right? But according to the European, when the United States and Russia came there, they claimed that it was a civil war, right? They were battling communism is taking place. It's ironic, that this, you don't even know their language. You're not in depth with their customs. How did you know it was a civil war? But I digress. Point being is that what did they do? They come over there and they pressure the UN. They say, well, we need to start elections and we need to elect officials that are in line with the Western Bloc. Okay? That are in line with our agenda, because we're battling communism, supposedly. Okay, so what happens? They establish, and the UN legitimizes it, gives it credibility. They establish what's called the Republic of Korea in South Korea. All right, and then what did the Soviets do? They rebel, or they reply by what? Organizing their own political party in North Korea and calling it the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Now you have North and South Korea created by 2 European powers. You thought North Korea and South Korea popped up on their own? And meddled in their elections and their affairs. And just so happened, ironically enough, supposedly the Soviets was pumping communism, and they were able to pull out a year earlier before Truman was able to pull out, and Truman was pumping capitalism and democracy. Anti-communism, but the person that they put in place was an authoritarian, and they couldn't even leave because there was so much unrest. But this is what you were bringing to the people. Brought a civil war inside of a civil war. Come on, man, this is ridiculous. Meddled in their elections, meddle in elections all over the world, but all of a sudden their elections get meddled with. Oh my God, it's a fire. It's the end of times. Are you serious? Are you serious? This is what you have to understand. These are, look, let me tell you something. What I said before about redefining what you are? Because they already told you what you are. They said you are a human being. Okay? And then now from that you say, okay, from as a human being, I'm a Christian or I'm a Muslim, I'm, or I'm African American, or I'm this, I'm that, I'm a hustler, I'm a rap. And so now you're in this bubble. But when you establish yourself as a light being, when you redefine what you are, because that's exactly what you are. Like I tell people, I give a lot of examples, and I wish people go, to a lot of these lectures, but we're gonna go deep off into some of this stuff because I know a lot of people may not even have time to do this research. So, as your bro Heru's gonna do, we're gonna try to jam pack all this into these 2 segments. So the fact of the matter is that a couple of examples. When you, especially a woman, and she's familiar with this, and fathers are too if you've been there for the birth of your child. When they test the oxygen levels of your baby, what do? They hook up, they put a stent on the index finger of the child, right? And then they shoot a light through that child's finger. It's called a pulse oximeter. All right? People in hospitals know about this. And then the light that comes back that to the machine determines the level of oxygen in your blood. Because why? Hemoglobin, heme, is a light ring. It's an organic ring that captures light. That's one of your blood's primary responsibilities, is to capture light. Okay? Globin is the protein. Heme is the organic ring. It is a porphyrin ring. Okay? And a porphyrin ring is made up of 4 P-roll rings. Now that's deep science, but those P-roll rings are made up of carbon. And of course that goes back to carbon and organic chemistry, because we know organic chemistry is a study of carbon. And we know that the melon molecule, which is 34 atoms, 18 of those 34 atoms are carbon. Carbon is also articulated by their establishment as being the king of elements. Come on, man. Let's get it. Let's get it. And this is what you have to understand, that you are. You are a light being. You absorb light. Redefine what you are. With that being said, I got to bring the receipts. Because I told y'all, see, this is one of the videos I asked you guys. I said, look, check this video out. And some of you may have done it, some of you may, haven't. But this will bring things into perspective, and this should help to reshape your worldview. Now, it's a 3-minute video. Okay? We finna, look. Like I said, we about to, I ain't playing no games. I ain't playing no games. Because see, you need to know what you are. You need to know what you are. All right? All right? All right. Shouts out to this queen, too, for putting this together. That's why I got to play it from the beginning, because sisters like that who own that, all our people who own it, who understand that we light beings, you got to make sure that they get their props.
And it turns out that the molecule melanin, actually, when we mess with genetics and stuff, one of the ways in which we can do it is to use things like ultraviolet light to actually splice the genes in the cells and actually alter the genetics, or to get things to, things we've put in to actually take, so that we can almost microsurgically implant them in the cells. The thing is, if these cells have got a lot of melanin in them, with dark pigment, it tends to absorb that light and diffract it and turn it into vibrations, etc. And then the light just doesn't get where it's really supposed to go. And so really, in the discovery, perhaps even accidental.
Do you want to explain the special about melanin and how it protects the cell, the DNA inside the nucleus? That's very important.
Part of the reason you can't do these experiments, where there's a lot of melanin around, the melanin actually in a lot of people, in black people, it's actually spread out through the skin. It spreads out through the cells and covers everything. But even in a lot of white people, the melanin actually will coat the nucleus of the cell. And therefore the DNA, your central DNA, even in white people, can be actually well protected from the actions of the ultraviolet
There's no
light.
doubt in people with higher melanin, natural higher melanin, that it's far more likely that that melanin will be coating the nucleus, the cell wall of the nucleus of the DNA. Now the point about that is that ultraviolet light, which is often used to splice DNA, is blocked by that melanin. It absorbs it. It doesn't allow it in to interfere with the DNA. And it could well be, and this is Nigel's thesis, that this was a blocker for them when they were trying to genetically alter the species. And therefore, when maybe just out of random mutation, something like an albino came along, they discovered, wow, we can get straight in.
Right.
And it may well be that the paler-skinned nation, people on the earth, maybe have that pale skin because of this genetic experimentation to make things easier for them to work on human DNA. And in fact, Professor Steve Jones argues that this thing about vitamin D being, paler skin being there to allow vitamin D to be absorbed and so on, all these theories about why pale skin happened in the first place, he believes it's not an adequate explanation. There is no real explanation or justification for the need for pale skin at all.
Yeah, because I think if
Dark skin is always an advantage in every no real explanation or justification for the need for pale skin at all.
Yeah, because I think if
Dark skin is always an advantage in every circumstance.
it's more assume, well, they went to live in the north where there's like.
You hear that, brothers and sisters? No real explanation or no justification or need for it. She talked about, she said that was her thesis. Her thesis, which she wrote, she said that because melanin envelops the nucleus, you couldn't get through. Like they knew that UV light, which is a part of the electromagnetic spectrum, all right, which is responsible obviously for giving us our, for activating the vitamin D, right? This, the melanin could reject, it could bounce and refract it, like he articulated too as well, right? And what she said, they had to wait for it. It kind of runs along the same lines of a lot of theories, like especially like with the Muslims and how they believe that the scientists I forget why it's not getting my name, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. I'll get back to it. One of you people in the bottom of the chat, hit me up and let me know what that name is. But when they talked about how they're manipulating the DNA and how they couldn't, these supreme beings wasn't able to do it, and because they couldn't get past the melanin, right? And this is what they're saying. As they're looking at the melanin and how it envelops the nucleus. And so they had to wait for a genetic abnormality. Okay, had to wait for a genetic abnormality or a mutation or albino, because then the melanin, even though it envelops them, it wouldn't be hard to get through with the UV rays. Okay? So that right there is something pertinent for your to understand that what it boils down to, what we talked about with the heme and the absorbing of light, being a light being, and understanding that they could not break the melanin, that God molecule that you were given. So they had to wait for a mutation. You understand what I'm saying? And so that goes back to us understanding, like, you have this whole argument. A lot of times you hear people talking about, and it's crept back up into the conscious community with foundational Black Americans and, versus, the diaspora, Africa, Pan-Africanism. And this is one thing that I tell people all the time, just go back and look at the dates. We keep dates, and that's what's so critical. That's what we have to continue to keep doing, because the dates resolve it all. And I can tackle this, this is what I talked about before. Like, even when I rock with certain people, I rock with Dan Calloway and all of them, and I like, the foundational approach, simply because I understand history real well. Okay. And, even without hearing you like, oh, I'm the first one to present this type of information, and maybe strike and keep it, like we talked about, nothing's new under the sun. And I'm going to show you how a lot of us have been on this, because I'm going to present information that nobody will present. Like, you haven't heard this, not even from him. This is not an arrogant thing, but it just goes to show you that a lot of us have to remain level, because you don't know who out here working and who knows what. Let's take a couple of examples to isolate. Remember, we already talked about how in the 4 voyages that Christopher Columbus was on, he crashed 9 ships. They had no seafaring capabilities whatsoever to speak of. Even if you look at the establishment of Jamestown, Virginia, which I believe, obviously in the 1600s, 1607 or something like that, somewhere around that time, Look at the number of people that came on them ships, and then the vast majority of them died. Okay? When Christopher Columbus had landed in the place that he had landed in, which we already know to be Hispaniola, right? We knew that what he had sent back, his message was what? He could make all these people slaves. We already know that these people, that's why we talk about all the time why people should be so careful, especially people, who claim that they're Latin. You're not a language. Your people did not speak Latin just as much as our people did not speak English before we came into contact with the European. You see what I'm saying? And so they primarily was able to subdue more so from disease like they're doing now. Notice this has been the algorithm. Just like, disease was the way that they did it. And it's a guy who wrote a book. It's called Guns, Germs, and Steel. And he talked about, and what he should have isolated more so than anything else and should have put before guns was germs. Because remember, we go back and we reference whose book? Bartolomé de la Casa. Okay, 1552, destruction of the West Indies. When he detailed how in Hispaniola, 8 million inhabitants had died due to disease. We know that was the same, like we said, method used when meeting the Indians. Or people here, there were already people here. That's what you already have to establish. Look at the numbers of the people who came on it. Now, if there are 8 million people in Hispaniola, which is modern day Dominican Republic and Haiti, if there were 8 million people that died over there, imagine what the population was in North America. As you can see, we have to pull up receipts again. So I'm gonna pull up a picture. Now, this picture, that is, now you can look it up yourself too. That is the 1760, those are the colonies. Okay? Those are the colonies. All right? 13 small colonies. Now, the pink is Indian territory. King George III set this proclamation in 1763, and he said you can't go past that proclamation line. Now, you got to understand, in 1801, Napoleon had sold the United States, what? Louisiana territory. All right? Louisiana territory included Louisiana and 15 other states. A territory was bigger than a state. So you have the West being controlled by Mexicans and Africans. You got Florida controlled east and west by the Spanish. You got the middle of the continent being controlled by the Indians and the French. Okay, then you have this portion of Indian territory, and then you have these 13 colonies. In 1791, the first consensus was taken. Colonial America was what they termed as overwhelmingly rural. Okay, country. The first consensus was taken in 1791. You know what the population of New York was at that time? 33,000. They never had the numbers. This is one of the reasons why they was beaten in secret. This is one of the reasons why the first 9 presidents was elected by them, because it was just only them. They're in there. It's like a club. It was like a club back then. You act like it was this grand empire, and nothing could have been further from the truth. It was an effort of manipulation and dirty tactics, tribal warfare, guerrilla warfare, and them turning people against each other like they are so adept at doing, even now to this day. So let's take another piece of evidence. What we're going to isolate is what? 1793, I believe it's 1793 or 1791, Eli Whitney invents the cotton gin. Okay? Because this is what you have to understand. There's 2 different types of cotton. There's long staple cotton and short staple cotton. Long staple cotton could only be grown on the outside or where the colonies were at. Okay? Short staple cotton, which was the most preferred, could only be grown in the interior of the United States. But hold up. You can't be Cotton King yet. Why? Because you're not even in those territories. Those territories are not even controlled by you. Okay? And then you don't see, and what was so arduous about what made the work so hard, no matter how many slaves you had about the short staple cotton, was because of all the little seeds that were in the cotton. So what the cotton gin did was separate those seeds from the fiber. And then it picked up production, and production skyrocketed around 1801. And then in the early 1800s, that's when the United States became known as Cotton King. But that was after the invention of the cotton gin. So look, this is what I'm saying. Until, 1860, you have the war. Now we know what? We know that in 1820, they had created the American Colonization Society. They were sending niggas back to Africa. 1787, the English were sending slaves back to Africa. 1787. Now think about this. We know our people live long. Our grandmothers get 90, 100 years old. Now, let's just say, for instance, slavery, they just start, shackling people up in 1600s. The English are sending them back in 1787. Trying to get them to do what? Now, they're warring with other tribes. The tribes don't recognize these niggas. It's just 100 years removed. If that, you telling me you don't recognize your own people? Because they were different tribes. And we all know they called those in Liberia the Americano Liberians. They were Masons, and we know that Samuel Doe, and we all know that he had government connections too as well. But he, displaced the so-called rule of the Masons and took power in 1980, so forth and so on. And then the process was colonization of Africa's culture, you see, and to spread Christianity, because they knew that they couldn't do it themselves. Why? Because they didn't contain the melanin molecule to be in a tropical zone. They call it the Tropic of Cancer for a reason, brothers and sisters. It's literally called the Tropic of Cancer is because Hippocrates had noticed it, and they had talked about it like it had actually formed what was called a crab. Okay? Because it's in the crab constellation. All right? And the crab looked and branched out, and that's what it looked like, and they called it cancer. Okay? Literally cancer. Look, every hour, a European dies from skin melanoma. That's 24 Europeans a day that die from the sun, not being able to process the UV radiation because of the lack of melanin. All right? So we have to understand, this is, like we said, the advantage is in, from a material standpoint, the matrix, but the advantage for us is from a biological standpoint, not airing out,